You respond too quickly. Before the moment even settles, before your body has time to register what just happened, you're already saying it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. No, really, I didn't mind. The words come out smoothly, almost automatically, like you're helping the other person relax. You laugh when something feels slightly off. You soften your tone when you could be direct. You nod along while something inside you quietly pulls back. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's there, that small tightening in your chest, that flicker of discomfort you don't give time to fully form. And if someone notices, you shut it down even faster. No, I'm good. You don't pause. You don't check. You don't ask yourself what you actually felt. The reaction is immediate. Make it easier. Make it lighter. Make sure nothing becomes a problem. Because the moment you slow down, something else might come up. And that's the part you've learned not to risk. You learn to answer quickly for a reason. Not because you're naturally easygoing, but because there was a time when taking too long to respond made things worse. A pause could be interpreted as attitude. Silence could invite pressure. So you got faster. You started smoothing things out before they could escalate. You say, "It's fine," early, sometimes before you even know if it is. You soften your tone mid-sentence. You adjust your reaction while it's still forming. And if something does land wrong, you recover almost immediately, at least on the surface. That didn't come from nowhere. At some point, showing a full reaction had consequences. Maybe it created tension that filled the whole room. Maybe it led to being ignored, mocked, or told you were overreacting. Maybe someone withdrew and you felt the shift instantly, the distance, the coldness, the sense that you had made things harder just by expressing something real. So you adapted. You became easier to be around, less demanding, quicker to stabilize. You learned how to keep interactions smooth, how to absorb small discomforts without letting them turn into visible problems. You figured out how to return things to normal before anyone had to deal with your reaction. And it worked. People stayed calmer. Conversations stayed manageable. You avoided escalation. You avoided being labeled as difficult. In many situations, this made your life more predictable, more controlled. But over time, something subtle happened. What started as a situational adjustment became your baseline. You didn't just use this strategy when needed, you began using it everywhere. Even when there was no real threat, your system responded as if there might be. So now, you don't wait to see how something actually feels. You preempt it, you manage it, you reduce it before it has a chance to fully register. And because this pattern develops slowly, it doesn't feel like a strategy anymore. It feels like your personality. Like you're just someone who doesn't get too affected, someone who moves on quickly, someone who keeps things light. But underneath that, there's a different process happening, one that didn't start as personality at all, but as protection. If this reflection resonates with you, subscribe to follow this psychological journey. Because the way this pattern shows up in your daily life is more precise and more costly than it first appears. You send a message and then keep checking if it's been seen. Not obsessively, just often enough that it starts to feel automatic. When the reply takes longer than usual, something tightens in your chest. You tell yourself they're busy, that it doesn't mean anything. But your mind quietly starts scanning for what you might have said wrong. And when the reply finally comes, you read it carefully. Not just the words, but the tone, the punctuation, the spacing. You adjust yourself accordingly in your next message, softening your phrasing, adding an extra "no worries" or "take your time" so nothing about you feels demanding. In conversation, you notice how quickly you step in to smooth things over. Someone interrupts you, and you laugh it off. Someone makes a small remark at your expense, and you respond with something self-deprecating before anyone else has to react. It happens fast, almost before you've even registered that something felt off. Later, though, it lingers. A single comment replays in your head while you're doing something else. You reconstruct the moment, thinking of what you could have said instead. Not to confront, just to land better. To keep the atmosphere intact without losing yourself so much. But in the moment, that option never feels available. When you need something, it rarely comes out as a clear ask. It gets softened. You phrase it as a suggestion, or you wrap it in an apology. It's totally fine if not, you add, even when it wouldn't actually be fine. You leave space for the other person to say no comfortably, but you don't leave much space for yourself to want anything directly. You stay available longer than you meant to. You answer messages when you're tired. You agree to plans you already feel drained thinking about. And while you're there, you make sure you're easy to be around. You monitor your reactions, keep your tone light, and avoid anything that might shift the mood in a way you can't control. You apologize for things that don't require an apology, for taking too long, for asking a question, for needing clarification. It slips into your sentences so naturally that you barely notice it's happening. And there's a particular kind of smile you use, one that appears right when something doesn't sit right with you. It's quick, polite, and just convincing enough to move the moment along without friction. But underneath it, there's a quiet calculation happening all the time. Who seems off today? Who might be upset? Whether it's something you did, whether you should adjust. You pick up on small shifts in people's energy and feel a subtle pull to correct for them, to bring things back to neutral, to make sure nothing lingers unresolved, even if no one asked you to take that role. And by the end of certain interactions, there's a specific kind of tiredness. Not from what was said, but from everything you held back, reshaped, or carried for someone else. You leave the conversation thinking it went fine, but something in you feels slightly less present than before. And you don't stop to ask why. You notice it in the smallest moments. Someone's tone shifts slightly, and before you even register how it made you feel, you're already adjusting. Your voice softens. Your posture opens. You offer something, an explanation, a joke, reassurance, anything that stabilizes the space. The reaction is immediate, faster than thought. And that's the point, because what you're really avoiding is not the discomfort itself. It's the exposure of it. The moment where your face might show it, where your voice might carry it, where someone could look at you and see clearly that something landed. Being hurt is manageable. Being seen while hurt feels dangerous, so your attention leaves you almost instantly. It moves outward, scanning. What does this person need right now? How do I keep this interaction smooth? How do I make sure this doesn't turn into something bigger? Inside, something tries to form, a sentence, a reaction, a boundary. But it gets interrupted mid-signal, rewritten into something more acceptable, more efficient, less revealing. I didn't like that becomes, it's okay. That felt off becomes silence. I need a second becomes immediate engagement. You're not expressing anymore. You're translating. Every feeling passes through a filter before it reaches the surface. Not to clarify it, but to make sure it doesn't cost you anything, especially not connection. And over time, that translation becomes automatic. You stop waiting to find out what you actually feel. You go straight to what will work, what will keep the interaction intact, what will prevent any shift in how the other person sees you. This is where the split begins to settle in. There's what happens inside, quick, subtle, often unfinished. And then there's what gets shown, clean, controlled, easy to receive. The distance between those two grows quietly. Not because you're hiding something dramatic, but because even small, honest reactions start to feel risky. A pause might be misread. A direct answer might create tension. A visible reaction might invite questions you don't want to answer, so you stay ahead of it. You manage the moment before it manages you. But in doing that, you lose something specific, not your emotions. Those are still there. You lose access to them in real time. Because your attention is always slightly ahead, slightly outside, slightly focused on impact rather than origin. You become highly responsive but less anchored, present but not fully located within yourself. And the strange part is, from the outside, it looks like strength, composure, emotional control, but internally it feels like never quite arriving at your own experience before it's already been edited. You don't just avoid conflict, you avoid being witnessed in an unprocessed state, which means even your honesty starts to come out rehearsed, timed, safe. And at some point, a quieter question begins to surface underneath all of this. If you're always adjusting before you're seen, what would actually happen if you didn't? You smooth things over before they can even turn into something. You keep your tone light, your reactions measured, your face easy to read. When something lands wrong, you adjust quickly, add a soft laugh, a quick, "It's okay," a reassurance that nothing is wrong. You think you're preventing escalation. But what you're actually doing is teaching people that there is no cost to crossing you, because every time you absorb the impact without response, the moment disappears for them. It doesn't register. There's no signal that anything needed to be handled differently, so the behavior repeats. Not because people are always careless, but because nothing in the interaction told them to be careful. And then you try something else. You explain. You clarify your tone, your intention, your wording. You add context, soften your language, fill in every possible gap so there's no room for misunderstanding. You stay longer in conversations than you want to, just to make sure everything is resolved, clean, settled. But the more you explain, the less weight your words carry. Because explanations, when overused, stop sounding like clarity and start sounding like negotiation. Like you're asking for permission to be understood instead of expecting it. And people learn that if they wait long enough, you'll do the work for both sides. So you go further. You make yourself needed. You become the reliable one, the accommodating one, the one who doesn't drop things. You respond quickly. You remember details. You offer help before it's asked. You make it hard to replace you. It feels like security. But it isn't, because being needed is not the same as being respected. People may rely on you, but they don't necessarily become more careful with you. In fact, the more consistently you show up without limits, the more your presence gets treated as a given, something stable, something always there. And things that feel guaranteed are rarely protected. So you stay available, even when you're tired, even when you don't want to talk, even when your body is already signaling that you've reached your limit. You answer anyway. You show up anyway. You keep the line open so no one can say you were distant, cold, or difficult to reach. But constant availability doesn't prevent distance. It creates a different kind of it. Because while you are always reachable to others, you become harder and harder to reach for yourself. Your signals get quieter. Your preferences blur. Your sense of enough starts to disappear under the habit of staying open. And underneath all of it, there's one rule you don't break. You don't let yourself feel anger fully. You redirect it, dilute it, reinterpret it. You tell yourself it's not worth it, that maybe they didn't mean it, that it's better to stay calm, to stay good. Anger feels dangerous, not because of what it is, but because of what it might do to your relationships if you let it show. But anger has a function you keep overriding. It marks a line. And when that line is ignored often enough, not by others, but by you, it stops appearing at all. None of these strategies are random. They are precise, they are consistent, and they all point in the same direction, reducing friction, avoiding rupture, maintaining connection at any cost. But the cost is not small, Because every time you choose pleasantness over honesty, explanation over clarity, usefulness over limits, availability over rest, calm over anger, you reinforce a quiet agreement with yourself that your role is to adjust, and over time, that agreement becomes your environment. Not something you consciously choose, but something you live inside. The part that fails isn't your effort, it's the assumption behind it. That if you manage yourself well enough, nothing will hurt you. But there's something in this pattern you haven't fully looked at yet. You notice it in small moments. The pause that almost happens before you say, "Sure," and how quickly you override it. The flicker of discomfort when something feels off, and how fast you smooth it over so nothing changes. It's subtle, almost automatic, but it's the exact point where you leave yourself. For a long time, it felt like protection. If you stayed agreeable, nothing escalated. If you adjusted quickly, nothing broke. If you carried the tension quietly, everything kept moving. And that looked like safety. But it wasn't safety, it was constant self-removal. Real protection starts to look different. It shows up as a delay, a breath that you actually take, a moment where you let your reaction form before deciding what to do with it. You don't rush to fix the atmosphere. You don't immediately translate your feeling into something acceptable. You stay with it, even if it's inconvenient, even if it changes the tone. Because the shift is not about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming harder to move away from yourself. You still feel, you still care, but you stop stepping aside the second someone else enters the room. You stop negotiating against your own signals just to keep things smooth. And slowly, something stabilizes. Boundaries stop feeling like attacks. Self-respect stops feeling like risk. And the place that used to give in without question becomes the one place that finally holds. If this stayed with you, subscribe.